Hello to everyone out there. My name is Angie Peacock, and I'm a psychiatric drug withdrawal consultant and a healing coach. Today, we are speaking with a person I admire dearly. Her name is Brandalyn, and I would call her a sister who has been through many hard things, as many of us have, being a patient in the mental health system and then coming off the psychiatric drugs and healing herself as much as possible. That's Brandalyn. Welcome, Brandalyn. Nice to see you.
Hey, Angie.
So let me go ahead and read her bio so you all can kind of get a basis of who we're talking to today. In year 2000, Brandalyn was a 27-year-old mother of two young sons. She was struggling with a divorce and trying to support her family alone on $8.50 an hour. She arrived at Psychiatry, where she was diagnosed with Major Depressive Disorder and given the prescription drug Paxil. She had an immediate and profound adverse reaction. In less than 90 days, she was hospitalized for the first time and diagnosed with Schizoaffective disorder. By that year's end, she was considered totally and permanently disabled. For 20 years, she was prescribed more than 40 different discrete psychiatric drugs at various dosages and in varying combinations. In 2020, she peered beneath the veil and departed Psychiatry. On March 23rd, 2022, she completed her final taper. In 2021, Brandalyn enrolled in community college while in the throes of psychiatric drug withdrawal. She will be graduating next month and is transferring to a 4-year institution to study cellular and molecular biology, where she hopes to make a contribution in the field of deprescribing sciences. Holy cow, wait. I just read that out loud, and it was like, you took me on this hero's journey. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it felt like. I went all the way downhill, and then I came all the way back up like a phoenix from the flame.
I haven't gotten anywhere yet. I'm just studying.
You're just starting, really. But yeah. That's what it felt like. So what did it feel like to you to hear me read that?
Honestly, there's a little bit of pride there. There's a little bit of pride, and and there's a little bit of, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that.
And you said something to me once that I'll never forget, that I've repeated since. And it was like, on their watch, look what happened.
Absolutely.
And now you're on your own watch. Okay, so let's jump right in as if we haven't already. But can you share a little bit more about like your experiences as a patient in the mental health system, like what your treatment was like? Just take us where you want to.
Honestly, I struggle with this because I think that I thought I was being treated well. And I did all the things I was supposed to. If they said, hey, go to this group, I went to this group. If they said, hey, try this therapy, I'll try this therapy. If they said, hey, you need to switch to this drug, I do that too. All I knew was basically what they told me. And I feel that, I don't know. I think looking back, it's more difficult to see good treatment. I hope at the time they did the best they could with what they knew, even though ultimately I feel that it harmed me.
Yeah. And like, I just thought of something, because I know a lot about your story, that
right.
People, I think they have this misnomer where like, okay, meds, you can come off your meds if you have like depression or anxiety, but not when you are seriously mentally ill. Or there's some people that really need drugs. And I would consider myself one of them that really needed them. And one of, like, what people would say really needed
right.
them. And I mean, it's all over my medical records where it says persistent and severe chronic mental illness, not likely to improve. Like, those words were stamped all over my records. And people can't believe that, because they see me now and they see that I've regained health. So let's talk about, like, when you were bad, how bad was it?
It was pretty bad. I immediately, I went on an antidepressant, and I started hearing things, and I started seeing things, and I started, thinking things that, honestly, they reminded me of thoughts that I had when I was a kid. Because I went through a period of really profound trauma when I was right around 11 years old, right around puberty kind of thing. And it was, and I started thinking weird things. And that was very much like what happened to me when I went on the Paxil, is I kind of regressed to that, 11-year-old kid who was horrifically traumatized. It was weird.
Yeah. Yeah. But they identified that as, see, you're really mentally ill. Here's a new diagnosis.
Right, exactly. And, and my records too had, persistent, severe, unlikely to, non-responsive to treatment, all these other kind of things. Basically, I was, you know, I was unsavable in their eyes.
Yeah, like it's almost like, I think they call it like, we're not really trying to cure anything. We're just trying to manage your symptoms.
Right, exactly. And I don't know. Looking back, I'm like, was I really that bad? Was I really that bad that they had to, I mean, I think about, okay, I think the first antipsychotic that I was given was Risperdal.
Mhm.
And I cycled through all of the atypical antipsychotics. I did have the wherewithal to say no to Thorazine. That was about the only wherewithal I had because, I'd seen Cuckoo's Nest and I went, ooh, not doing that one.
Not that one.
But everything else, and honestly, it was only because I didn't like the doctor who suggested it.
Mm.
It was like I felt like if I took these medications, then I would be pleasing these people and that sort of thing. And that felt like my job. It was my job to, make these people happy like they were my parents or something.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So I want to bring in the GAF score,
Okay.
because I had one too. And when I was in the military, so people might not know this now, but if you were in the mental health system like the year 2000 through 2010, I don't remember when they stopped using it, but they used to have a numbering system to say like how bad you were. So my GAF score when I got out of the military was like a 46. So I'm going to read that to you. 46 means serious symptoms or any serious impairment in social, occupation, or school functioning. You brought up your score. What was your score?
20.
20. So let me read to you what a 20 is. Behavior is considerably influenced by delusions or hallucinations or serious impairment in communication or judgment. Yeah. So that's how bad we were.
I was awful. I was absolutely awful. It's painful to look back, honestly.
No.
It really is. But it was like, I don't know. I didn't know. It was like when you put a frog in the water and then slowly turn up the heat and it never knows anything happened to it. That's what it was like because it happened to me so slowly and imperceptibly. I had no awareness of how bad off I was, except in retrospect now looking back and it's horrible. I call it the horrible knowing. It's like realizing how bad I was and realizing what everyone else saw and realizing that, people were nice to me, not because they were nice people or not because they liked me, but because I was really, really bad.
Wow.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Like, I think I can relate to that a lot because back then, you just take your medicine, you go to your groups, you go to your appointments, you go to your doctor, kind of existing. You
Exactly.
don't feel good. But
Exactly.
looking back, I think well, you saying that, I'm thinking to myself, if she had a 26 GAF score, what'd you say it was?
20.
20. You had a 20 GAF score, but you're taking all these meds and you're going to all these treatments and you're going to all these therapies. Like at one point, it's like we don't even realize, it takes away our ability to realize, wait a minute, this is not working.
Right. But at what point do they not realize? At what point do they say, hey, this isn't working? We should stop doing this. Nobody,
No.
that never crossed anybody's radar. It's like, why was it always me that was the problem and not their treatment protocol?
Yeah. And like me, I don't think they ever said to you, like, maybe it could be the meds you're on.
Never.
Never.
Nobody did. They would just switch them out. I mean, erratically. I mean, that I think I shared with you that first or the one of the hospital stays. I mean, I was put on 4 different medications in the span of 3 days. And I have no idea what those dosages are because I haven't gone that carefully through the records. It's too awful.
It's painful.
But but it's definitely there. There are like 4 or 5, and being in the hospital and that sort of thing, or being I was in the community mental health system because I was deeply afflicted with bad insurance. And it was like everyone had the same diagnosis and everyone was on the same medications. It's like they didn't even try to treat anyone. They were just, it was just they wanted us to shut up and get out of their office so they could get someone else through, so they could get that billing code and just move on to the next. It was the same cookie cutter treatment. I mean, it didn't matter if you had depression or a schizophrenia or whatever. You all got the same medication and you all got the same 5 minutes, and it didn't matter. We didn't matter.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to like the whole thing, like there's really no cure for these people. You guys are
Right.
seriously mentally ill. and here's just the diagnosis of the day and the medication of the day. There's not a whole lot of thought that comes into it, from my experience also. But I think it's really depressing because I talk to a lot of parents who their kids were put on psychiatric drugs at like 16 or 18 or 20, you know, something around
Right.
there. And then they're diagnosed with something in the serious category, like schizoaffective, schizophrenia, psychosis, whatever. And then they run through all of these treatments. They run through all the meds. They run through all the programs. They do all this stuff. And now they have, you know, a 45-year-old adult living in their house that has no like emotion. Like they're just sitting there lifeless. And then
Exactly.
psychiatry claims that like that's the best we can do. Like that's
Right.
it.
Well, I
And
was talking to somebody earlier today. I'm sorry I cut you off,
no, you didn't.
but
Not at
it
all.
was very much about the dopamine thing and how, you know, your muscles need dopamine to contract.
Mhm.
So the whole flat affect and the whole, you know, down dog, you know, strong shoulders and shuffling feet thing, which I was totally part of that crowd, may be a function of dopamine deprivation because, you know, basically you can't contract your muscles to produce expressions. And I didn't know that because I wasn't looking in the mirror,
Right.
you know, I don't know. I mean, you depend on other people to, you know, on psychiatry to do their job.
Yeah.
And on their watch, I was seriously and permanently disabled within a year. So
Yeah. So I feel like maybe that sounded insensitive of me, what I just said, but what I'm saying is like the parents, they run through everything. You've run through everything. I did too. We tried everything, and then you get to a point where you become disillusioned and you're like, this is all like I don't understand. And for me, there was a little part of it that was like, I'm doing everything they're doing and I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse here. Like, what the hell is going on? So then that caused me to like hit a wall of my own like I guess reverse cognitive dissonance. What would that be? I don't know what word that is, but it's like where you get so disillusioned, you start questioning things, you know. And I think
right,
that's what happens with a lot of the parents that I meet. They're like, I don't understand. My kid is someone who he wasn't. And I don't think that's
right,
a product of some serious mental illness that has evolved. I think I'm looking at something that has evolved that's like medication induced or treatment induced or ECT or who knows what it is, but it's something else. It's become something else. And I feel like
right,
I became something else. You know what I mean?
right.
But then you
See,
hit
I
that.
blame myself. I blame myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am nuts. I'm nuts. I'm like the craziest person they've ever seen, clearly, because I'm not responding to all the stuff that everybody else does. It must be me.
Not
That's what I
working.
did.
Yeah.
You know, you know, at the end, when I decided to come off and that sort of thing, I'm looking at them and going, wait. But for the longest time, I always, you know, self-reflected. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm hopeless. That's the way they made me feel. They made me feel like I was hopeless, like I was a hopeless lost cause.
Case. Yeah. And you're pointing to something really important because it's the focus on the individual's brain chemistry versus the individual's past, the trauma, the socioeconomic state of their life, the context they live in. That's why I studied social work, because I was like, they shifted the focus away from the individual and said, what context does the person live in? But those questions
Exactly.
aren't asked. If you have 5 minutes with a psychiatrist, nobody asks you like, why could you be possibly having delusions right now or strange thoughts, or why are you traumatized right now? Like, let's talk about
Right.
that. That's not even really brought into the equation, especially when you have crappy healthcare like you and I both do.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Just like it was your fault, your brain chemistry. We need to tinker with that.
I felt like I had disappointed them, you know, for the same, you know, it was very much, you know, I kind of fell into the paternalism, you know, paradigm. You know, if I didn't please them, then I was the bad, you know, patient. I was the bad child. And here I am not responding to this medication and they're trying so hard.
Yeah.
That's you know, that's the way it translated in my head. I felt guilt, I felt shame, and I felt hopeless
Yeah.
because their treatments failed.
Yeah. So then that leads us right into the waking up process. Like, how did you wake
Right.
up? How did you wake up? What happened?
Honestly, I was in a personal situation that was just unbelievably like it was exactly the kind of stunning, you know, turn of events that I needed to take a really serious look at what was going on with my life. And I responded by throwing a rather enormous temper tantrum. And I'm like, well, then I'm not taking your meds, because I was a very large child at that point.
Mhm.
And I was in hospital, and I um, when they did some medication changes that resulted in kind of like I couldn't use my right arm and I could barely use my right leg. And I was discharged that way because I think that was like first time in my life where I signed myself out of the hospital. And for the first time, I felt some degree of empowerment. So I'm like, hey, I am running with this. And when I got home, whether it was this way or whether it was only this way in my imagination, it felt like they were trying to like wait me out and have me come back and beg for help. But I spent a week on the floor in my apartment and, couldn't get back and forth from my bed to the bathroom kind of thing. And I like figured out a way to do it. And it made me mad enough to go, I'm not doing this anymore. And so, I was in touch because at one time I had been a peer support specialist. How that ever happened, I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all, but I was. And I was still in touch with some of the people that I did peer support training with. And one of them, introduced me to, some people that are involved in the withdrawal process and support and all that kind of thing. And I think a friend of a friend introduced me to you and that sort of thing. I started going to some of the patient advocacy groups, and at first it was, the very the very righteous, apoplectic indignation of the, how could this happen? But as I calmed down and that sort of thing, it was more like hey, they're having the same, that's my story. I heard that I just, it was a recognition of myself and my symptoms. And I didn't really like make any contacts within those situations, but
did you mean like people were coming off psych drugs, or
people that were coming off psychiatric medications? There was some panel discussions for Medicaid Normal that I sat in. There were some stuff with Intercompass Initiative, things like that. And I didn't really participate as much as I just paid attention. But again, it was just the recognition of, hey, that's my story, that's my symptom, that kind of thing. But the waking up process was very much, it was slow. It was really slow. And it was difficult. I moved because I didn't feel safe from psychiatry in the town that I lived in. So I moved across the state. I was like suspicious of everyone. I was, openly hostile, and it was just awful. And then as time went on and that sort of thing, I found little things that worked. And for me, one of the things that was walking. And so as I began to walk more and that sort of thing, it's like I started to notice things around me that weren't inside of me. And whether it was just a winter, it was, oh my gosh, it's snowing. It was really that simple. I mean, those like, observations were slow. They were slow. And then as things got going and that sort of thing, realizing again, that terrible knowing, the realizing, oh my God, I was not what I thought, and neither was anything else the way that I thought it was. It wasn't just psychiatry, it was relationships that I had. It was my relationship with the world. Nothing was as it was in my own mind. And it was traumatic. It was really, really traumatic.
Can you say more about that? Are you saying like the influence of the psychiatric drugs in your life and the way that you had looked at yourself as a mentally ill person all those years?
Yeah. I mean, they affected every single relationship and every single part of my life. I mean, it's difficult. Even now I have difficulty trusting, people and that sort of thing, with the information that I was a mental patient. I always proceed with caution. But the relationships that I did have and that sort of thing, there was such a deep and profound sense of betrayal because it was like, I had people that were, using me for my very small income. I had people that, were using me basically as a, look at what a great person I am. I'm with this person who's obviously such a, a pathetic person.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that. And I'm looking around going, you've got to be kidding me. So I think, the sense of betrayal was really profound. And I kind of I needed to get to the point where I gave up on the life that I had and everybody in it and start over. And that's kind of like, how I arrived at community college was just, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I cannot go back. I don't want to be around these people anymore. I hated my town and everyone in it. It was just, it was awful. It was awful.
Yeah. So I think we skipped over this part, but like in that process, you tapered off psychiatric drugs on your own.
I
right?
did. I was with a psychiatrist and again, I think I started tapering right before the black box warning came out. So it was September or October.
For
And
benzos.
yeah, for benzos. That was one of the last drugs I was on. I had a seizure at the very end of that taper. And so I needed to abruptly discontinue Wellbutrin. And so they kind of happened simultaneously. But I worked with my primary care physician, who, I was given dissolving tablets because apparently I was thought to be, just, very, very prone to anxiety and needed to get that medication in me immediately.
Yeah.
But I went from like 1 milligram tablets and I was on 4 milligrams of Klonopin when I started to discontinue.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started like, cutting 1 milligram tablets. And then when I got to where I couldn't quarter them, because that's basically the level of my cognition at the time, I would switch to a 0.5 milligram tablet. And then when I couldn't quarter those anymore, I switched to a 25 milligram tablet. And, when my daughter-in-law was in labor with my granddaughter, I took my last medication, and that was a year ago yesterday. It was, I'm like, my grandchild will never know me like this.
Amazing.
And, that was a year ago.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
how did you learn about tapering correctly and safely? And like, how did you just get through it and do it day by day?
I was so cognitively impaired. And I think maybe that was a protective factor, honestly, because I wasn't really aware of the dangers as much as I am now. I just kept going. I had some, some knowledge from the groups and that sort of thing, or, I printed out the Ashton manual, but to be quite honest, I couldn't read any of that. And if I could read it, I couldn't comprehend it.
Yes.
So it was like, I would listen to the groups and I kind of listened to, what are other people doing, because, I couldn't cut, I couldn't measure, I couldn't I thought about ordering a jeweler's scale, but that just sounded very, very complicated to me. And so I'm like, well, this will work. And all I know is I wanted all these medications badly enough to do it badly. And, it was that important to me.
Yeah.
I wanted me back real bad.
I love that. I mean, I often ask people like that I work with, why are you doing this? You have to know why. Like, what is it? And most of the times the people answer, they say, I'm just curious, Angie. I want to know who I am underneath this. I want to know what health feels like. I want to feel better. I don't feel good. I don't know what it is, but I'm curious enough to know. I feel like I deserve it enough to know like what is going on. Like, I need to know. It's really kind of sad to hear that, Oh, so yeah, tell me like, what was your why? Like, talk more about that.
My why, I mean, at first, again, it was just a temper tantrum. I was just throwing a fit. But once I got through the rough part of those cuts or that sort of thing, I started having these little glimpses of like me, these like glimmers of reality. This, I don't know if they're lucid moments or what, but it was like, I would remember me. And the strangest thing about the withdrawal process is like, when things would come back, I never knew they were missing until they came back. So I didn't know. I mean, I think, when you and I had talked, it's like the most recent thing is I feel gratitude again. And that's not something I felt in like years and years and years. And I didn't even know it was missing until I realized, oh my gosh, I'm grateful. right now. I was speaking with an advisor at school. I'm like, I'm so grateful for, and then I stopped myself. I'm like, I'm grateful.
Feel it.
I really
Yeah.
feel this. I feel this emotion. And so, yeah, so that was kind of like my why, was those little glimmers of me. And it was like you were chasing a butterfly or something like that at
Beautiful.
first,
Oh my God. It makes me want
you
to
know?
cry. Yes, because that's why I like doing this work, because I just get to see people wake up, like
Right,
come out of this fog, a nightmare, a suffering nightmare for many, because it's not easy to get off psych drugs at all. It's not
right.
easy to like break from the narrative and be like, I want something different. Like this isn't working for me. I feel like it's a
Wow.
human rights issue, because, you know, most doctors are like, no way, you can't do that. You're mentally ill. That makes you dangerous if you think that you can do that. And it's like, okay, well, if they
Absolutely.
had
Absolutely.
support, if we had correct support, you know, safer tapering, like patient-led tapering, support for withdrawal, other options to other treatments that are less
If our
harmful, like
if our doctors permitted themselves to be educated about what we're going through,
they
I
don't
don't
even
think
want to
they
hear it.
can. I
They
don't
don't
think
want to
they
hear it.
can. I mean, you
No.
can't believe anything that your livelihood depends on you not believing. So, I mean, there's that. But, I mean, it's like, I still, with my primary care physician, who, I'm still in contact with, and I still go to his practice. I want to tell him, it's like, please listen to me, because you're harming other people. Look at me. You cannot deny that these are harmful when you see the profound effect it had on me. I'm not an island. I'm not special. This didn't only happen to me. This is happening to a lot of people.
A lot. And I say the same thing, like come sit with me for a day and listen to these stories.
Right.
It's horrific, you know, but I wish it wouldn't have happened to any of us, but I think there's almost like they don't understand it because it's not happened to them, or they
Right.
are not open enough to hear
They
the
can't, they can't, they can't hear that, that they harmed their patient. They can't hear that. That's absolutely antithetical to their Hippocratic oath and everything they believe and everything they've
yeah.
been trained to do. They want to be healers. They can't hear that what they did caused harm.
Yeah, and I think it's not even like, let's give them, I know people, this is controversial to say, but let's back up a minute. It's not even that they're purposely harming, it's that they are taught a certain way and they follow that way, and anything outside of that is seen as like further evidence of mental illness almost, or it's
Right.
impossible. Like I can't tell you how many stories I hear weekly, daily, of like, I try to tell my doctor like these are withdrawal symptoms, and they're like, no, that's anxiety. And it's like, okay, but if you have burning skin and physically pinprick sensations and your skull, that's not anxiety. That's not in the DSM as a symptom of major depression. It's not. It's a
Right.
physical symptom. Like what? Anyway, so it's like, just because you have a mental health diagnosis, you're automatically not believed. And just because they're not trained in deprescribing, this does not exist. Okay, well, I'm
Right.
here to tell you, and you're here to show us, like, yes, it is. We're both stories of it. Like,
I mean,
look at me, look at both of us, look at our medical records, look at us now.
right. I mean, I have a different relationship and a different thought on psychiatry as opposed to my primary care. And I don't know if that's just someplace I have not yet arrived. I honestly, I know my primary care. I do not think that individual tried to harm me or,
No.
anything like that. What I think is that, doctors are trained to be skeptics. They're trained to disbelieve everything you say and rule things out.
Mhm.
If you can't prove it, you know, and not only that, but it's like I don't think that they receive the education. I don't think, I mean, I think they get most of their education from drug reps, and probably the short skirts probably distract them from the message.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just that's a huge, huge problem. The psychiatry, at least in the system that I was in, it feels like a willful, denial.
Willful
It
blindness.
feels it feels somehow willful, like they've made a decision to disbelieve rather than, as a
Investigate.
consequence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, because there is lines of evidence showing benzodiazepines change the
Hmm.
way, you know what I mean? There's basically Mark Horowitz's research has proven that the way that the lay person withdrawal community is tapering off psychiatric drugs on their own accord is actually the
Hmm.
correct way to do it. Like there's
Right.
research proving what we're saying, and they don't want to hear it at all. And
Right.
it's really upsetting to me, which is why I've chosen to just help the individuals get through it, because I don't see system change happening. There's too many forces opposing it.
Right. Well, that's partially why I've chosen to do what I am in school and that sort of thing. I mean, at the beginning, it was very much to educate myself. I mean, that
Yeah.
was kind of like my only thing. I was like, well, I'll figure out how to do this better.
Mhm.
And now it's like, I know that if things happen to me, and I know a little bit of the culture in labs and in,
Yeah.
medical professions and that sort of thing. And I live at the corner of, being astounded and horrified. I never know which way to fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So I love that. So yeah, let's talk about your healing process. Like coming off the drugs is one part, but then getting your life back is another part, which is
right.
why I wanted to talk to you because I feel like you're right in the middle of that process. Like you're waking
Yeah.
up, you're seeing the beauty in life again, you're feeling your emotions again, you have goals again, you're actually able to do things, it's not
Right.
hellish anymore. So
No.
you tell me as much as or as little you want to, but can you talk about like how long did you taper? How many drugs did you taper? Then what happened? Like, what are the symptoms that you experienced? Like that whole thing.
Right. So at the end, I don't know how many medications I was on. Honestly, I have not gotten to that record, and it's too painful to look at it. I know that I carried a Ziploc bag, one of the gallon size Ziploc bags full of medications everywhere I went because
Yep.
I didn't want to miss my schedule because that was how I took care of myself. I know that when I went to the hospital the last time, I was discontinued off Lamictal. I know that I was discontinued off 2 milligrams of Klonopin. I know that my Risperdal was changed. I know that I was given trazodone, even though I had told them that made me feel like the inside of my skin burned.
Mhm.
Um, you know, um, and I had that back when it used to be Deseril before it went, to generic. It's just, but there was that, but when I was in the hospital from the time I started tapering Klonopin was 18 months. The time I started tapering all psychiatric medication was about 2 years.
Wow. Good job. Yeah.
Symptom wise, I have to think the cognitive stuff for me was the worst.
Mhm.
It was very much the horror of knowing how I was and the people around me and how, and then just, I still haven't come fully to terms with the fact that 20 years has passed it's like when you go to the dentist and you receive, a twilight sedation. And it's
Mhm.
like, you're kind of aware of what's going on and you can follow commands and that sort of thing, but you really don't know what's up.
Right.
That's how my life was. Most
That's
of
such
my
a good
life was spent
analogy.
in that state.
Wow.
And it's like, the only thing that I don't see myself as a 50-year-old woman. I still see myself as a 27-year-old woman, and that's
Mhm.
been the really difficult thing to reconcile.
Mhm.
I still have the energy of a 27-year-old. I mean, my goodness, I'm in college. I ride my bike like, 10 miles, 5 times a week.
Mhm.
I mean,
You
all
walk like
this.
more than anyone I know.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I optimize at about 8 miles a day. I just,
Mhm.
I'm doing yoga in the morning. Oh, and I just picked up, pool therapy. I'm just,
Holy cow.
it's what I do. I have a lot of energy. Um, but it's like, I don't realize my age until I see myself.
Mhm.
And that to me is just every time I do, it's like, what happened? So it's still
Yeah.
the cognitive things that I struggle with. You know, physically, I would say the muscle aches. I mean, my right arm, which is the one that I lost control of when I first went off, Lamictal, it still hurts all the time. I mean, the muscles in that particular arm are really, really having a rough time.
Mhm.
Postural changes. The way I carry my body, the way I walk, the way I sit, the way I hold my head. It's taken me a full year to get that hump out of the back of my neck,
Yep. Yep. Because you
and
were
learning
just like
to,
walking through life like
yeah,
this.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Looking at the ground all
Downtrodden.
the time,
Yep.
and it's like, but, and I had like a literal hump on the back of my neck, like someone with Alzheimer's or something like that. I know there's a particular name for that, but I don't
Mhm.
know what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, my body physically changed into very much like I had dementia. It was a kind of an induced dementia of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, there's that kind of thing. I have some nerve, issues in particularly in my right leg, but a little bit in my left foot.
Mhm.
I don't think I was as profoundly physically affected as a lot of people, because I did have some wisdom to draw from, and I did have some experiences to say, hey, probably not going to be your best bet to go get more psychiatric medications that harmed you, at
Yeah.
least for me.
Yeah.
You know, I think the vestibular issues, even now, if I'm really, really tired, which happens a lot because sleep is obviously an issue still.
Mhm.
But the vestibular issues, you go outside and you walk around, and the dizziness, it's for the most part gone.
Mhm.
But I have had a really difficult time adjusting to those visual, basically the proprioception kind of things,
Yeah. Yeah.
where am I in space?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, the time distortions, the proprioception, all those sorts of things, I still deal with, but on a way lesser
Yeah.
degree.
But I mean, you are climbing back into life. Like, it's been beautiful to watch it, just to see, people are always like, when they enter a taper, they're like, oh my God, this is going to take 6 years. Angie, you took 6 years to feel like a human being again, or whatever, people say. And
Right,
it's like, okay, but everybody's different. And some people do heal as they come down off the medication. So that's kind of
right.
why I wanted to bring your story. Cause like, you're only a year off, 1 year.
Right. And honestly, I know I was on more than 10 medications for, to be fair, I was on more than 10 medications, probably around 12 to 15.
Yeah.
Um, but
You mean at the same time
at the
or the
same
whole
time,
course?
I was on 15 medications when I
Exactly.
entered the hospital that last time.
Yeah.
And you know, so I don't think, honestly, I think I trail giants in some ways, and I've had the benefit of other people who have gone before me, wisdom. And so I don't think I was as profoundly affected. And even if I was I wasn't as afraid going through it, because I knew kind of what to expect. And that was probably the best part of it, is
Mhm.
knowing, okay, this is not a terrible, you're not dying right now,
Right.
because I felt like that for a long time. It's like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I'm dying.
Mhm.
Um, but knowing that other people felt that way and came out of it was a tremendous comfort to me.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I don't feel that I was as profoundly physically impacted. And the fact that, um, I mean, I did all right cognitively before I went into this. I was
Mhm.
stacked up pretty high. And so coming back, I mean, my cognition is not anywhere near where it used to be. My memory, which at one point in my life was almost autographic,
Mhm.
is not anywhere close to that,
Yeah.
but it's not bad.
Yeah. And you're
But
well, and even me myself have seen yours improve over time.
right,
So it seems
right.
like you come out of the fog. It just takes time, right?
Right. I think you and I had worked on a paper together at one point, and I could not think through a thought. And
Yeah.
now it's like I can write complex, paragraphs about complex ideas and that sort of thing. And that's only in a 6 month span of time.
I know.
It happens fast. It happens in almost a violent manner. It's like the healing happens so fast, but it's the best kind of violence, if that makes
Yeah. I
sense.
like that way you said that. That's good. That's good.
you
Yeah.
know,
But earlier you said something about I should have said this earlier, but you were talking about just all those years walking through life thinking you were doing what you're supposed to do, you were doing okay, relatively okay, and that you attributed that as a cognitive deficit. But to me, I heard grief. Like, we lose huge chunks of our lives, like
yes.
unmet potential, unlived dreams, unfulfilled, life goals that we had, like huge chunks. We're not talking about,
Right.
I see women usually in their 50s. Like, most of my clients are women in their 50s. And the sad part for me is when they say, Angie, I've been on these drugs for 30 years. I raised my kids. I walk through life like a robot. I don't even know who I am.
Right.
Like, who
See, for
am
me,
I?
the,
I
the
don't.
worst part was I didn't really get the opportunity to raise my kids, at least not in the way I wanted to. I mean, I was in their lives and that sort of thing, but I had, the extensive support of my grandparents, actually.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I was in an adult foster care home before that first year ended. So
Yeah.
I didn't get the opportunity to impart to my children the things that I so wish I could have.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing that helps that is that I look at them now and they're grown, and, and they're happy, and they're, they have beautiful, wives, and they, they're successful and all these kind of things. And I think, gosh, the things that I really, really, really would have wanted for them look a whole lot like what they've got right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to,
Beautiful.
as much as hard as that is,
Mhm.
because it kills me.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you know, they're okay. That's
Yeah.
really what matters in the end. So I'm just, I'm trying to
Yeah.
find peace with that still, but
Yeah.
but yeah, so there is a tremendous amount of grief there.
Big grief. I think that's a process that we all have to work through. Just like, what did I lose? People ask me sometimes, like, Angie, are you angry? Like, are you still mad? And I'm like, I don't have time to be mad. Like, I definitely was. Part of my anger was activism and advocacy and trying to help the problem. That's how I
Right.
channeled it. And then it was, and we're going to get to you doing that yourself. But then it was like, I need to live life now. Like, I'm running out of time here. I can't
Exactly.
be in the anger. It's something I move through. It's something I think about every once in a while, but I can't, I lost my 20s and 30s. Like, I'm
Right.
not going to lose my 40s I have to live. Like, it's now,
Right.
now or never.
Right. I mean, yeah, very much the same. I mourn. Yeah, all, you know, um, how can you miss what you never knew? Well, you
You
do,
do know. Yeah.
and there's a homesickness for, the me I used to be.
Yeah. I like the way you
So,
said that. But
so
yeah,
yeah,
to play devil's advocate, I think psychiatry, or to give their argument, whatever, steel man, is that what they call it? Steel man. To
a
steel
steel man,
man their
straw man.
argument,
Yeah,
to steel man their argument against what we are saying, it would be very much like, well, we were managing your symptoms, we were doing the best we knew how, we were keeping you managed or whatever, or perhaps you had
I
a
didn't want to be managed though, Angie. I didn't want to be managed. I went to them for help and they said, you have an illness, we'll treat your illness. They didn't say they would manage my symptoms. They said they would treat my illness. Well, it turns out the illness was not mine. The illness was not mine. The illness is the world we live in. And it's, it's a symptom of a larger problem that, I have not even begun to come to the beginning of that particular yellow brick road. But I do know that it was not an illness, and I did not receive care for an illness. I was, I was medically, impaired.
Mhm.
And I think it would be difficult to look at any of my pictures or any of my videos or anything like that exist and not see an impairment rather than an illness that was being appropriately treated.
right. And you point to, if it, I have two questions. One, if you could take a magic wand and go back to the period of time where you went on medication, what do you wish could have happened instead or in addition to?
Eh, You know, I think it goes back to, I was facing, I was having a divorce and I had two little boys. They were 9 and 11 years old. I made $8.50 an hour. And that looked like a real bleak future for three people. And I was overwhelmed. What I really could have used was a raise at work and a vacation and a best friend who I could have gone and talked to and gotten support and a hug. That's what I really needed. That's what I really needed. I really needed a friend, and I really needed some practical terrestrial help. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but to all the people, who said, well, you're having a hard time, we'll pray for you. Boy, could I have used some terrestrial help.
A meal or picking your kids
Yeah,
up from school
exactly.
or giving you a weekend off.
Please come, give me a ride to the store. I mean, that kind of help,
Yeah.
as supporting, like, I was a very young mother. And so, had like, okay, had parenting classes and that sort of thing not been set up by the courts as some sort of punitive thing, I probably could have used that kind of support.
Yeah.
I mean, I was overwhelmed as a parent. I mean,
Right.
they got to the point where I really hadn't been raised any older than that, and I didn't know what to do. And I had boys,
Mhm.
so it was like, I could have used some parenting support. I could have used a raise at work. I could have used more than 4 sick days a year,
Mhm.
without facing losing my job. It was just, the world was set up in a way that did not support, young families, and particularly not single parent families.
Right. Right. So then my second question on this topic is, if I look at this completely differently now since I've gone through this experience and experienced my own version of psychosis, so-called, whatever. So
Uh-huh.
if we don't have mental illnesses that need to be treated with medication and chemical imbalances, then what is it that we all are going through or experiencing when we enter a mental health office? Like, what is it? Like, how do you look at this differently?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like, okay, so like we label people like psychosis,
Right.
schizoaffective, you're labeled all these things. Their current treatment is you have a chemical imbalance of some kind. Here's a drug to fix that. We just kind of manage your symptoms. We tell you to be quiet, like go home and here's
Right.
a disability
Please,
check,
please get
whatever.
out of my office.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's not like a medical illness, the way that they purport it to be, or it's not a chemical imbalance, then what is it that we're all experiencing? Like looking back on yourself, like what is it that happened to you?
I honestly, I think that in my diminished capacity, I was trying to communicate something. So when I would go and report stories that probably didn't make much sense to them or whatever, I was trying to communicate something. I just didn't have the ability anymore.
Yeah.
These medications so impaired my ability to communicate that I couldn't get out, what I was experiencing in my head. I couldn't communicate it well enough for people to understand it. So I
Mhm.
think, it's basically at some level, some sort of very creative, like, attempt to try to communicate with a world who does not understand what you're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think R.D. Lang says like psychosis and schizophrenia is it's a attempt at healing. Like even that is like my mind is so creative that it will create a whole nother universe that makes sense to me because the one I'm currently living in is intolerable. It's too traumatic,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
I mean, for me, it was the most, it, honestly, I kind of miss it a little bit.
Mm.
Um, you know, jokingly refer to it as Brandyland. But it was a far kinder place than the world
Mhm.
we actually inhabit. Um,
Mhm.
and now that it does not exist or that sort of thing, because once I think I was maybe 6 months off antipsychotics before all of that disappeared. I haven't heard a thing and I haven't felt a thing. Nothing of that world existed once I came off the antipsychotics. And I was told under no circumstances, there were dire predictions of, imminent demise if I came off of those kind of things. And so I was terrified to do so for the longest time. And once I did, it was like, wow,
The
that
world
doesn't
looks different.
exist anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So last question. Tell us about your education goals. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about what happened to you? What are you going to use? I
Okay.
guess. Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's like, I think when you come through this and you get to, and I'm not on the other side yet, but I'm a whole lot
Yeah.
closer than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
I think I feel a tremendous responsibility to help others in the situation that I was in. Um, I'm right now I'm at the level community college. I am getting a transfer agreement for my state, which is kind of like your basic liberal arts education. It's your prerequisites, for example. And
Mhm.
then I'm also getting another degree simultaneously, which is an associates of arts for a STEM transfer, which is science, engineering, technology, and math.
Mhm.
A year ago, a year ago, when I took my placement test to get into college, I had to count on my fingers to get through the placement test. So I'm
Yep.
doing a little better now.
A lot.
You know, but I'm not exactly sure where this path is going to lead right now. And this is a working plan. This is not a final plan.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm transferring to a 4-year university this fall. I've been accepted, all that kind of stuff. I've got to do my financial aid paperwork this evening.
Mhm.
But I'm going to study cellular and molecular biology. And that was actually at the suggestion of a couple people that I really admire, and I really trust their judgment. And they had said, hey, this may, be the appropriate path for you. After that, I think where I'm going to go for graduate school, because I only have 2 years left on my bachelor's degree, I'm probably going to plan on master's degree at a am I allowed to say the name of the school?
I mean, what do you think?
Okay, at the University of Michigan is where my goal is to go to study pharmacology. And I'm also, I kind of want to donate my brain. It's like, I mean, it sounds a little bit odd to say that or whatever, but it's like, because I was so profoundly impacted, and I have like changed so profoundly again. I feel like there is knowledge to be gained there. And if I can, if I can in any way, I don't think everyone comes away from this with the ability to articulate the experience. I don't think everyone is in a space to perhaps, contribute at the level of, in a lab, or, for whatever level or degree that I'm able to contribute.
Right.
Is I just want to make sure that what happens to me did not happen to someone else. I want to make sure that I share my experience, so that with professionals who are in a position to make a difference. Because my time here is finite. I like that science just, you contribute. And as knowledge, changes, the information changes, the recommendations change. So maybe just hearing me will change the paradigm enough to make sure that, this doesn't happen to, one of my children, or one of, somebody else's children. Or for the children that are currently in the system or whatever. If this happened to me and we backed off successfully, how did that happen? So, so we can get people off, when things do go wrong, we can get them off safely and appropriately, and with as little harm as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your goal for the future educationally? Is it deprescribing sciences, or like, what are you thinking about?
I think about deprescribing sciences. I think, I don't think, honestly, given my substantial mental health record, any licensing board in the world would, permit me to,
as long as you're
practice.
honest and open about your struggles. Usually
there's a culture there that I'm not sure they would allow me to
there you
break
go.
into.
Same.
But I certainly am in a position where I can offer suggestions and participate in research and that sort of thing, and help at that level. So I'm not exactly sure what the end game is. At the end of the day, I want my children and my grandchild to be happy and to be proud of their grandma. So,
Awesome.
that's all it is.
I love it. You're kicking butt at that. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
you took your health back in your own hands. Like, that's
trying real hard, trying really, really hard.
And you've created something beautiful. And I feel like you're just getting started, really.
Yeah, and I'm definitely at the beginning of the journey. So, but I'm really, really grateful to be
so
here.
great. You're so great. Okay, so the last thing, and I always like to end like this, is just, I like to end on hope.
Yes.
So what hope can you bring people that are listening?
My quote, it's like, don't quit. If you quit now, you will be right back where you were when you started. And when you started, you did not think you would be here. So keep going. And it's like, yeah, nothing in this world is free, fair, or fun, but keep going, because man, oh man, I'm telling you what, once you get through some of that darkness, there sure is joy. So
I love that. It's beautiful. Thank you, Brandalyn, for sharing your story.
Angie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this. It was beautiful. And thank you to everybody out there that's watching. I'm sure if you leave comments below, she'll probably come in back and answer it or something, but share this with people that are maybe at the beginning of the journey, or they're learning how, all that. So thank you so much, Brandalyn. Any last words?
I mean, Angie, what you do is great. Thank you so much for everything you've done. I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.